Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm reacting to my second Midnight Tales video for you guys, and this one's titled 5 Disturbing True Motel Horror Stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera back up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road and in the bag, shall we? Okay, everybody, here we go.
Last week, my husband and I had to take this ridiculously long 17-hour road trip to North Carolina for a wedding.
Okay.
Between the drive, the family dinners, and the endless catching up with relatives, we were totally wiped. We booked a room at this modest little motel for the week. Nothing fancy, but it did the job. By the time the actual wedding day arrived, we were already running on fumes. That morning was chaos. We were both rushing to get ready, barely keeping up with the schedule. My husband got dressed first and headed out for a few last-minute errands before we left for the venue. So I had the whole motel room to myself while I got ready. It was one of those insanely hot and humid mornings, and since I didn't want to sweat through my dress while I was doing my hair and makeup, I figured I'd just get ready in my underwear for the time being. The sink and mirror in this motel weren't in the bathroom. They were just kind of out in the open, right across from the bed. The curtains were drawn, but they were thin. The kind that give you privacy, but not total invisibility.
That's one thing I hate about going to motels, is that sometimes shower curtains will be like that, where you have a little bit of privacy, but people can still look right through and see what you're doing. I mean, that'd be kind of weird if you were in there and somebody picked the lock to your hotel room door and got in and see what you're doing. That's just wrong. But also, it is kind of weird that when somebody builds a hotel, they put the showers like right directly in front where the bedrooms are. I mean, that's just weird. I don't know why they wouldn't build a separate wall built-in bathroom area just so it'd be away from the bedroom, you know. Luckily, I never stayed in a hotel with that floor plan. Hopefully, I never will, because I think that would be weird. But let's continue.
You could probably still see a shadow or silhouette if someone was looking hard enough from outside. So there I am, curling my hair in front of the mirror, just trying to look somewhat alive after a brutal week, when I catch a glimpse of someone walking past the window. No big deal. I figured maybe it was my husband coming back early and checking to see if I was ready. But then the guy stops. And he doesn't just stop. He starts leaning in, trying to peek through the curtains like he's looking for something or someone. At first, I still thought it might be my husband being goofy or something. But then I realized, no, there's no way. If it was him, he wouldn't be creeping around the window. He'd just walk in. And that's when things got really freaky. This man, who I now knew for sure was not my husband, didn't just linger outside. He walked right up to the door. And before I could even react, he opened it and stepped inside. Yeah, he literally opened the door and walked into the room like he owned the place.
Man, I would have put a do not disturb sign outside that door, but she should have had locked it and gave her husband a room key just to get back in if he needed to, just so something like this wouldn't happen. But oh yeah, that would be creepy if just somebody just staring at you through the shower and it's not even your significant other. Man, this is getting me chills down my spine. Lordy.
Turns out, when my husband left earlier, he must have forgotten to pull the door closed all the way so it didn't actually lock. He felt awful about it later, but in that moment, I was just staring at this tall stranger, probably over 6 feet, who had just let himself into my room while I stood there in nothing but underwear, holding a curling iron. My whole body just locked up for a second. My brain started flashing through survival mode like, is this how it ends? Do I fight? Run? Scream? The guy just stood there, staring at me like I was on the menu. He had this wide, disgusting grin that made my skin crawl, and he started mumbling something, soft and low. I couldn't catch most of it, but I heard "pretty lady" and "come here," and that was enough for me. I don't know what snapped in me, but I went from frozen to furious. I charged at him with my curling iron still on, yelling, "Get out!" at the top of my lungs. I must have caught him off guard, because he stumbled back outside onto the motel balcony. I didn't wait. I lunged for the door and slammed it shut, locking it before he could even think about trying that again. I just dropped to the floor right there in front of the door. I couldn't even cry right away. I just sat there in shock until my husband came back about 15 minutes later. I told him everything, and he was furious. He wanted to go after the guy, but I begged him to stay with me. I couldn't be alone, not even for a second. We reported the whole thing to the motel's front desk, and they called the police. I gave them a full description of the guy, but after checking with the other guests, they said no one matching him was staying there. He was just some random creep who wandered in off the street. Needless to say, we skipped most of the wedding reception and left town a day early. What was supposed to be a joyful weekend turned into something we couldn't wait to leave behind. And let me tell you, I double and triple check every lock now, because all it takes is one forgetful moment, and someone with the worst intentions might just walk right through your door.
Yep, that's what we always do every time me and my folks travel out the state and we stop at a hotel. Always close the door and lock it, because you never know if somebody might have been spying on you to be like an easy target to probably get to the door quick and rob you, or worse, murder you or something else. God awful. Oh man, thank God her husband showed up and they called the cops, but man, I wish they had caught him. Because people that like that don't need to be on the streets at all. But that was a good, clever move on her part, taking the curling iron at him. He didn't expect that. That's one way to deter a person with evil intentions. Anyway, let's continue on to story number 2.
This one's a family classic. One of those stories my parents used to bring up every now and then when they wanted to remind us just how rough things were back in the day. It happened in 1984, way before I could remember anything. But I've heard the tale enough times that it feels like one of those weird old memories that sneak into your brain, even if you weren't fully there. At the time, my folks were seriously struggling. 4 kids, no savings, and barely enough income to get by. So we all ended up living in this little pay-by-the-week motel. Honestly, it wasn't glamorous, but we made it work for about a year while my dad worked his butt off, and my mom stayed home wrangling 3 of us under the age of 4. One morning, Dad was getting ready for work, and Mom was helping my oldest sister get dressed for school when she suddenly froze. She spotted a shadow right outside the window, someone clearly standing there, still as a statue. Now, my mom isn't exactly the brave type, so she panicked and rushed everyone into the bathroom, whispering frantically to my dad that someone was outside. At first, he kind of brushed it off like, it's probably nothing. But once he peeked out the front, he saw the guy too. Quietly, he made his way to the door, opened it fast, and just like that, the man bolted, running off like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't have. My dad figured if the guy was really dangerous, he would have tried something instead of taking off. So he told Mom to just keep the curtain shut and not open the door for anyone while he was at work. She hated the idea of him leaving, but bills needed paying, so off he went with my sister. A few hours later, I was apparently being the loudest baby on earth, screaming for no real reason, and Mom was doing her best to calm me down on the couch while the other kids watched Sesame Street. For some reason, she glanced at the window again, and yep, the guy was back. This time he was just standing there, real creepy, like he was trying to peek through the curtain gap. She didn't wait around. She grabbed me, still screaming, of course. herded my brother and sister into the bathroom, locked the door, and called my dad in full-blown panic mode. He dropped everything and sprinted home without hesitation. And what does he find when he gets there? The guy's still outside the window, cupping his hands around his eyes like some kind of twisted peeping Tom. My dad didn't hesitate. No warning, no yelling. Just stormed up and clocked the guy right in the side of the head. The man stumbled back, totally stunned, and Dad let loose, shouting at him, smacking him around, and asking stuff like, "You think it's funny to terrify a woman and her kids? You want to play games with my family?" He probably would have kept going, but the motel manager showed up, thinking Dad was the one causing trouble. In all the confusion, the creep managed to slip away. But he never came back after that, and honestly, good decision on his part.
Sorry I didn't comment as much. I was just letting the story play out, but yeah. That dad did the right thing to drop everything at his work and go confront that guy real quick, because if he hadn't, he probably would have been long gone and still kept on bothering his wife and kids. But I would, if I was the dad, I would be telling the hotel staff to call the police and arrest this guy for being a peeping Tom. But thankfully, he wasn't able to see inside all the way since the curtains were closed and couldn't see what his wife was doing with the kids. But that would be creepy still. Thank God he didn't come back and bother the crap out of them no more. Because then I'll be looking for another hotel room to rent out. Make sure that guy don't find them again. But yeah, that would be terrifying indeed.
So I gotta tell you about one of the creepiest nights of my childhood. And believe me, I had a few weird ones, but this one stuck. I was around 10 or 11 when my mom landed this job managing a small, old-school motel at the edge of our town. It wasn't glamorous or anything, but the job came with a place to live, so we packed up our stuff and moved in. The place was rough when we first got there. Broken walls, weird smells, and apparently the last guy living there was into some shady stuff. I found out later his wife was running a meth operation out of the place, while he just existed like a greasy zombie in the background. After a few months, we cleaned it up enough to make it livable. Mom was full-time at the front desk by then, and since the check-in area was practically part of our living room, we'd hear or see just about everything that happened at night.
That is messed up. A motel is supposed to be used for checking people in to stay for a night or two, and somebody before them had to run a meth lab out of it. I'm glad those people got caught and they're trying to make use of the place. But I got a feeling that this charming little spot is not going to be so pleasant later on in the story.
The weirdest part? People would just stroll in through that office door like it was nothing. Random strangers popping their heads in while I was mid-boss battle in a video game became normal. A lot of them were old customers, or more disturbingly, people still looking for Steve the meth guy. Fast forward a year or so, it's summer break, and I decided to pull an all-nighter playing Skyrim. I had my little blanket fort set up in the living room, and was deep into the game when I started hearing voices. At first, it was just some chatter coming from outside. Sounded like two men speaking a language I didn't recognize. No big deal. I figured they were guests who'd maybe been left a key or something. But then, the tone shifted. They didn't leave. They started tugging on the door. At first it was soft, like they were checking if it was unlocked. Then it got harder and louder, until they were pounding on it like they meant business. Now, our place was shaped weird, and my parents' room was way down this long hallway, so I realized real quick they probably weren't hearing any of this. While I sat there frozen, the banging finally stopped. But then I heard tapping at the window right behind the check-in desk. And sure enough, I could see this guy's shadow moving around behind the curtain, trying to get a better look. That's when I noticed another figure moving near the kitchen's screen door. I was full on panicking at this point, thinking these dudes were trying to break in from multiple spots at once. Instead of screaming, which would have been reasonable, I decided to be stealthy and crawled on my stomach into the little office area. There was this key drop slot in the wall, just a flap that people could use to return keys when checking out. I grabbed a pencil, popped the flap open a bit, and peeked through. And that's when I saw two more guys just standing there, hands buried in their pockets, staring at the house like they were waiting for something. I slammed it shut and nearly burst into tears. Right then, I saw the hallway light flick on, and my parents came out looking half awake and freaked. The second my dad turned the kitchen light on and yelled, "What the hell is going on?" All the noise outside just stopped. The guys took off like they'd been caught red-handed, one of them yelling something as they ran off into the night. I finally managed to explain everything between sobs, and we ended up calling the cops. They showed up super late and didn't really do much, just said it was probably some workers who didn't realize the motel was closed. That explanation never sat right with me. They didn't act like lost travelers or confused tourists. They acted like people who wanted in, badly. And I still don't know what they would have done if they'd actually made it inside that night.
Who knows, but I guarantee there was probably some people looking for that person that was running a meth lab out of that place. They probably did not get the memo that he's no longer there. I know they were furious now, but it's just not right. You just walk right on in and try to bust through the door to their living room and scare the crap out of their kid. Well, thank God they did not bust the door, but still, I'm just glad that the parents woke up and saw what was going on, and they bolted out of there like they don't want to be questioned by the cops. But I hate that darn cops showed up late because they could have got them on the road somewhere while they were running. I'm just glad that that family's all right and they're able to live on with their lives.
So the other day I was talking to my mom and we ended up reminiscing about this bizarre, sketchy situation my brother went through years ago. I must have been about 8 at the time, and we were living out in rural Colorado, like middle of nowhere. Why did we move here? Kind of Colorado. After dealing with brutal winters and small town weirdness, my older brother had finally had enough. He got his GED, packed up his beat up Saab, and decided to move back west to live with a friend. He left us his ferrets, because apparently those little guys are outlawed in California, and hit the road, thinking he was finally escaping the madness. Well, the Rockies had other plans. Not even 5 hours into the trip, his car broke down while he was trying to drive through the mountains. He ended up stuck in some super tiny town after dark, and a local tow truck driver came to the rescue. The guy offered to drive him to a motel for the night, but instead of stopping at a normal chain place, he passed one up and said, "Nah, I wouldn't even let my dog sleep there. There's a way nicer place up ahead." Sounds good in theory, right? Except this nicer place turned out to be a crusty-looking motel that had definitely seen better decades. My brother's not the type to complain. He's kind of quiet, skinny, and avoids conflict at all costs. So he just thanked the guy and went along with it.
Man, if it was a hotel coming up on the road that you saw on the sign, you would jump on it immediately. I don't care how bad it would look. You should be all right. But going to something like this, maybe sketchy, you don't know who the owners are, and you might run into some trouble with some other people. You just don't know.
The place didn't seem too bad at night, but when we showed up the next day to get him, everything looked off. There was this dry, cracked swimming pool smack dab in the middle of the parking lot, like someone gave up halfway through building a resort. And then there was the whole family who ran the place, just sitting in lawn chairs, staring out at the rooms like they were watching a play. No phones, no books, just watching, all day. When we got inside my brother's room, it was even weirder. The bathroom had this little window right by the toilet, only a couple feet off the ground, with absolutely nothing covering it. So, if someone walked by while you were doing your business, congrats, free show. The room itself was run down and kind of sad. My brother pulled us aside and said, in the quietest voice, that he didn't sleep at all the night before because something felt seriously wrong. He explained there was this adjoining door that connected his room to the one next to it, like the kind some hotels have for big families. He said he'd heard some soft noises coming from the other side, so he opened his door just a bit to check it out. And what he saw freaked him out. There was a person standing perfectly still on the other side of the second door. Like, just standing there. Not moving, not talking. Just a human shadow, waiting. He closed his door and locked it right away, thinking maybe he was being paranoid. But a few hours later, he woke up to the sound of someone quietly rattling the doorknob, trying to open it. The guy was legit trying to get into his room. The sound went on for a minute or two, then stopped completely. My brother was frozen, too scared to even breathe loud, and just lay there all night listening for any other sounds. The next morning, he told us everything in this whisper, like he thought the walls had ears. He never saw the guy's face, but he had this gut feeling the dude had been watching him the whole time, probably from the moment he checked in. Between that and the weird vibe of the town, the creepy motel family, and the fact that the auto shop was shady as hell, it all just felt wrong. We ended up leaving the car behind since the repairs cost more than it was worth. Honestly, my brother was relieved. He was more than happy to leave that creepy town behind and come back home.
You know, me personally, I would have hired a tow truck driver with a flatbed and just got him to come pick the car up and take it back home. Because I wouldn't trust no shady mechanics working on it, and I wouldn't dare leave my vehicle there for them to tamper with later. But I get it, they're in a hurry to get away from that town, and I don't blame them. Because it's just kind of weird that they got a hotel that looks like it's unfinished or starting to fall apart. But I would be disturbed to even sleep like he described if somebody tried to walk into your room from the door leading to the other room. Now, if he said the story ended south where his brother heard the door to the other room slammed, then I know he probably been trying to make a run for it or something, like he won't stay in there another minute. But thank God that did not happen. And his mom and him got up there quick enough to get him and get out of there quick. This is why I would pick a Best Western or any other franchised hotel chains, because I know they keep their stuff clean and up to date.
This happened when I was about 14, during a weird in-between phase in my life. Awkward, visibly trans, still figuring myself out, and on a road trip with my stepmom and 3 of my siblings. We were crashing in a cheap motel somewhere in a small touristy town, just a pit stop on our way to Atlanta. The whole place felt like the kind of motel where you only stay if you're desperate or your car broke down 3 miles back. One night, my stepmom and I were hanging out on the stairs outside our room while the kids stayed in. That's when this guy wandered up. One of those overly friendly types who clearly don't understand boundaries. He apparently recognized my stepmom from a bar downtown, and without being asked, showed up with beer for her and a box of cheap popsicles for the kids. I didn't get the best vibe from him, but I was also a little gremlin when it came to snacks, so I started eating them while chatting with my stepmom. The guy kept glancing at me in a way that made my skin crawl, like I could tell he was trying to figure me out, sizing me up, staring way too long at my chest and crotch like he was doing some mental math. I shrugged it off at first, but I should have listened to my gut. Not long after that, I started feeling really nauseous. I went back to the room alone and locked the door behind me. My head was spinning, and I spent the next hour sitting on the bathroom floor, dry heaving while the room tilted around me. The kids were all passed out, and I didn't want to wake them. Then, around 3 a.m., I got a text from my stepmom asking me to unlock the door. I did, and there she was, alongside him. He smiled at me with this weird glint in his eyes, still staring like I was some kind of puzzle he couldn't quite solve. After they came in, she said goodnight to him like it was nothing, then laid down next to my brother and immediately knocked out like someone flipped her off switch. I made sure the door was locked again, double-checked the peephole, and tried to stay calm, but something just felt off. Not long after, I started hearing this scraping noise right outside the door, like something was being dragged across the concrete. When I peeked out, there he was. The guy was back. And he wasn't just hanging around, he was reaching for the doorknob. I panicked, but quietly. I grabbed the little pocket knife I always kept in my duffel and my pepper spray, and crouched by the door, trying not to completely fall apart. I attempted to wake my stepmom, but she was totally out, like unnaturally out. Then, of course, I threw up. Everything inside me just turned upside down from the fear, the nausea, the leftover popsicles, whatever was in me. It was coming out. And as I was dry heaving again, the guy started really messing with the door, like he thought it was going to give way any second. Eventually the noise stopped, and I carefully peeked through the peephole again. He was standing there, staring directly into it, smiling. He raised his hand and made that disturbing gesture where you drag your thumb across your neck. Then the gross finger through the hole move, like he was trying to be both threatening and creepy. After that, he turned and slowly walked away, but his eyes stayed locked on the peephole the entire time. I was still frozen when I heard a loud thump behind me, and I swear I nearly had a heart attack thinking he'd somehow gotten in. But nope, it was just my brother, who had rolled out of bed in his sleep and hit the floor like a sack of potatoes. I helped him back into bed, cleaned up the mess from earlier, and spent the rest of the night sitting upright, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. When morning finally came, I told my stepmom everything. She didn't remember a single thing from the night before. Not the guy, not the drinks, not even asking me to open the door. Honestly, I think that creep drugged her, and me too. I was just lucky I didn't pass out like she did, and maybe that's the only reason nothing worse happened.
Yeah, I think they were drugged too, just to make him sleepy. But I bet you he was probably planning on trying to get the door open and walk into their room and probably slash them. But yeah, that would be creepy. Man, I'll be contacting hotel security just to see if they got that guy on camera. If not, I'll be mad. But anyway, I'm just glad that they're out of that area safe and sound. That is one terrifying story. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more Midnight Tales videos like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I say that's a wrap, and have a nice day, everybody.